Okay, hi everybody. This is Drew Hudson from Divest Invest, and we're going to do the 2-minute redux version of our webinar from last month, from Divest to Reinvest. You can see on this first slide that we did this with a bunch of community partners, and elsewhere on this page you can find links to the recording of the whole webinar, which is about an hour long and included some great updates from folks at Enlace and Reinvestor Power and Southern Reparations Loan Fund and lots of other great partners. So check that out if you have time. But if you just have a minute or two, we'll tell you the basic gist from the perspective of what you can do as an individual to move from divestment to reinvestment. So the first part is introducing ourselves. This webinar was originally done by my partner, Vanessa Green, the individual campaign director at Divest Invest. And at Divest Invest Individual, we like to make the point that what we're really about is fueling change for individual investors and account holders and people at every part of the economic ladder. So whether you're a millionaire managing a major hedge fund or a hundredaire who has a couple $100 in a bank account, there are steps you can productively take to move the global economy away from fossil fuels and towards clean energy investment. And Divest Invest, and especially our website, Divest Invest Guide, is here to help you figure out how to do that and how to most productively move your money from one phase to another. And these kind of actions, when added up, really have a huge impact. This is some slides based on a report that came out last December, sort of a snapshot in time progress in the global divestment movement. And you can see that over almost $5.5 trillion as of last December had already been divested. And a huge part of that, more than 58,000 people, were individual investors, people like you or me or anybody else who has a couple $100 in a bank account or maybe a few $1,000s in a 401k or a mutual fund or any level of personal investment, really. And that's the biggest chunk of individuals. We're joined in our campaign by more than 700, over 730 as of last December, institutions that have divested. You can see the breakdown there on the right. Faith-based organizations, philanthropic foundations, governments, all kinds of different organizations as well as individuals are divesting. And we all together add up to a huge part of the global economy when we own what we own and we take control of our assets. If you haven't already, we definitely encourage you to visit the URL wedivestinvest.org. That's our main individual pledge, and there you can sign a real simple pledge that indicates your willingness and interest in moving your money out of the fossil fuel economy and into a new and cleaner energy system for all. So check out wedivestinvest.org if you haven't already to take a pledge to divest your personal assets at whatever level they are. So we said we want to talk about how banks tie into this. So for a long time, Divest Invest Individual, like I said, has focused on pension funds, 401ks, individual investment accounts, people's money who was in the business of being invested in markets. But what a lot of us don't realize is if you have a checking account, if you have a bank account, really anywhere, but especially at one of the big banks like Citibank or Wells Fargo or US Bank or a number of others, your money overnight while you sleep is being lent out to a variety of projects by banks. That, in fact, is how most infrastructure projects in the world, including fossil fuel infrastructure projects, are financed, is through loans from banks and from Wall Street banks that tally up all of our individual deposits and then use that money to finance a vision of the future. And it's up to us to decide whether we want to bank on a future which is invested in climate change or invest in a future which is invested in a clean energy future. And so last year, we worked with a bunch of different groups who had come together to protest the Dakota Access Pipeline, or DAPL, and together with partners all around the world, convinced 709,000, it was actually more than that, but that was the moment when we released the results, over 700,000 people to call on these banks to stop funding the Dakota Access Pipeline, to defund DAPL, and tens of thousands of them also took the additional step of closing their accounts. You can see that photo there on the lower left is one of the many people who closed her account with Citibank in particular, in solidarity with Standing Rock and the Defund DAPL campaign, and lots of folks have been doing that. And this has actually been a huge source of pressure and has created real results in the campaign to change the way that we finance fossil fuel infrastructure. And here's one example of that kind of result when we all add up our bank accounts and put our pressure together. It really does create reputational and material risk for the banks. It changes their behavior, and it makes them believe that the world can and must be different, as so many of us do when it comes to financing fossil fuels. The biggest example from this past winter was US Bank, which was a major financier of the Dakota Access Pipeline, under pressure from many of their account holders, as well as a huge mass media campaign that included banner drops in a football stadium during a televised game and all kinds of protests at Standing Rock, and lots of other actions that people took. US Bank made a big announcement in May. They were going to begin phasing out their funding of pipelines and fossil fuel infrastructure. We should be clear that they did not commit, immediately to stop funding these pipelines, and in fact, they still have lent money and are still banking on the Dakota Access Pipeline in particular. But they did make a big change in policy, and they were one of the first big U.S. banks to make that commitment. In addition, you can see in the middle there that a number of European banks like DNB, other management funds like the Odin Fund, and others have decided to move their money out and have closed their lending to major companies that build fossil fuel pipelines. And this is all based around, many of them at least, cite back to a reference to something called the Equator Principles, which is a commitment a number of banks have made to honor the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, and not to build pipeline projects or other major infrastructure projects without free, prior, and informed consent of Indigenous peoples. There's a huge loophole in those Equator Principles, which for those of us in North America, they basically don't apply, or they're not believed to apply usually on US or Canadian soil, because we are not developing countries in the particular definition they use. So there's a big campaign coming soon to target the banks around that, and you can learn more about it at Divest Invest Guide and at divestinvest.org. So that's our quick wrap up. If you have money in a bank account, if you have money in a 401k or a pension fund, if you own a mutual fund or a Roth or any kind of investment vehicle, you have power. You have power to move the markets and to change the way that we all bank and we all invest on a future, whether it be a climate change future or a green energy future. And here's a couple of quick actions you can take to do that. First, you can sign on to that petition targeting the 17 lead financiers of the Dakota Access Pipeline, the Keystone Pipeline, and a number of other tar sands pipelines in North America. You can do that at that first link, bit.ly defund pipelines. You can also sign up to deliver that message in person to a local branch. We saw a photo of the woman who had closed her account at Citibank. Lots and lots of folks have been staging similar kinds of actions at their local banks and choosing to close their accounts. And you can find out more and get help doing that at the second link, bit.ly defund pipes. You can also learn more about divestment in general and take the pledge to divest your accounts and own what you own. You can find out more at our main website, divestinvest.org, and you can take the pledge at that short link, wedivestinvest.org. And last, if you want more webinars and advice and little how-tos and guides and all kinds of interesting things about how to actually move your money, like this one, you can visit us at divestinvestguide.org. For Divest Invest Individual, I'm Drew Hudson. Thanks for watching.